The French Cultural Services has this thing where they publish excerpts from new French books every year, I think, or maybe twice a year. And so they send things out, excerpts out to different French translators. And they give you a choice. They have like all the books published in that rentrée. Like there's a whole bunch of books every year that are published in France. And then they're sponsored by the French Cultural Services. So I could choose from about 15 different excerpts. And I saw this, and I couldn't believe how good it was. I jumped on it.
What section was it that you first saw?
The first chapter.
The very beginning?
Yeah. It's called Fiction France, and I think it's online.
They give it out too, I think, in New York during the Penguin Voices Festival. They send it on publishers as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about your process, like how you go about translating a book like this specifically, but in general as well.
Well, I never read a book beforehand, so I get the book and I look through it to make sure that it's worth translating. But I can usually tell, like in the first chapter, that it's good or bad. And so I'm pretty much reading as I'm translating, and I read ahead a little bit, but mostly I read as I translate. And then at the end, I revise over and over again. So I usually end up with about 4 different drafts of a book before I'm happy with it.
Is this something you kind of decided to do on your own, or is it usual amongst other translators? I don't think it's very common.
It's more usual than they say.
Yeah?
They won't admit it, but Lydia Davis, a good friend of mine who translates Proust, she works the same way. She never reads ahead. And I corresponded with a Slovenian translator of the Kindly Ones, and she works in the same way. She didn't read beforehand.
Is there a specific reason that you do it that way, or is it just...
I feel like I'm more creatively involved in it if I don't know what's happening next. I mean, I feel more like the writer.
Mm-hmm.
If I read the whole book, then I would know it would be sort of boring. And this way I can sort of guess what's going to happen. And because the writer didn't have the luxury of reading his book before he wrote it. So, so it's sort of like writing because I think translators have to be good writers. They can't just, it's not just like one A to B. It's like internalizing the book and then recreating it, not just repeating it. So I think it helps not to know what's coming next.
Well, it sounds like, you say that sounds like a writer is interesting. I remember I read something about that Nabokov said once that you read a book the first time just to get the plot, and the second time you read it for the meaning. Maybe it works the same way for translating, I guess, in a way. The first time you go through it just to get it down, and the second and third time you go through it, you get more of the finer details of it.
Yeah, I'm never interested in plot, so it's mostly the writing that I really care about.
Yeah.
So I feel that if I'm really honest to those words, I mean, if I stay true to what the words are, then it comes out sort of the way the writer would want it to be.
Right.
So I try to stay as faithful as possible to just the writing, and I never try to impose myself on it. Like, if I think there should be some different way that the sentence should be, I don't try to do that. I just say what it says, and usually it turns out okay. And I think there are some translators who impose themselves more on the work.
Yeah.
And so when you read a translation by that person, then it always sounds like that person. And I don't want that to be with what I do. And I want it to sound like that author.
For Zone, I guess that leads into the next question pretty well too. I mean, because the way the book is structured, there are no periods, but there also are no real, in most cases, indicators of where the ends of the sentences would be. It just sort of flows from one thought into the next with no real break, and it's very difficult. I can't imagine what you did. But I know in French that the grammar of the sentences and the structure of the sentences themselves are very important for the meaning. So did you find that specifically challenging in this book, because there are no real sentences?
No, actually, I think for that reason, I think it was easier to come into English. I think it sounds, I can't say it sounds better in English, but I mean, I think it adapted really well to English, because I think we're more used to, well, the French have run-on sentences too, but I mean, we have Joyce, and we have these other examples of these long run-on sentences. So I don't know. It didn't sound too odd to you, did it? I mean, no.
It seemed in reading it, it seemed very natural. I mean, in a way that maybe some translations don't, I guess.
Yeah.
I was very surprised because I thought it'd be a very big challenge to make it read that way in English. I couldn't imagine what it would be like in French, and I know that their language were slightly different than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The author is influenced a lot by a lot of American authors like Ezra Pound. It starts out with the first canto of the first of Pound's cantos, and then it ends with the last of the cantos. And he mentions William Burroughs, and there's a whole bunch of other American authors that he is influenced by, and I think that helped the translation because I think it comes into English really well, better than a lot of like super French books.
Was there anything especially difficult about this particular book that you
I love
discovered
translating it. The hardest thing was not to translate it. I mean, once I started, there was nowhere to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, you come to like the end of a chapter or something, and you can stop. But I had to force myself to stop translating this because it's like I found it really engrossing, and also because I didn't know what was coming next, then I could always sort of I wanted to find out. So that was the hardest part. Was not doing it.
Yeah. This particular book references a lot of different wars throughout the 20th century, but also ancient Greece, and it's clear that a lot of research went into creating the book. And I was wondering if that was something that you that influenced, maybe not the way you translated, or if there's things you had to talk to him about, or references that you thought maybe influenced the way certain passages were written that maybe you didn't know and you wanted to check with him about. Because it's a very specific and detailed book in that way.
Yeah. Actually, there weren't. I didn't have many questions for him while I was working on it. I'm trying to think if there are some things that... the narrator is Croatian, and so we fought in the Yugoslav War for 2 years. And so there is actually a lot of Croatian in the book. So I think I did ask him a few things about, there was a term called Šedo, which is a term for the Serbians, a Croatian term for the Serbians. So I would ask him things like that, like Croatian words. But that was the only thing that I think I asked him about. I'd like not to have much to do with the author while I'm working.
That's the next thing I was actually going to ask you, is like how often do you, if at all, do you work with them? I know you did the tell, and I'm assuming he had a lot to say.
He had a lot to say, but only after.
Only after?
Yeah, I like to pretend they're dead. Then authors are much easier. So then, yeah, I had nothing I didn't say anything to him while I was working. And then afterwards, I sent him a few emails, and that was pretty much it. With the tell, it was much more because he's half American and half French, and so his English is like native. He sounds American when you talk to him. So I worked a lot with Mathias on the family ones, and he had certain ways that he wanted certain things he had a very specific idea of some of the wording of some of the sentences. So I worked with him afterwards. But Mathias knows English really well, actually, and he was really happy with the translation. He read it and he said that he had almost no suggestions to make, like no changes or anything, a few small things, but he was happy the way it sounded, which was a big relief to me.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't want to go back to the beginning on this, I don't think.
No.
You talked a little bit about how you found Zone. I mean, how was it? I guess I was hoping you'd talk a little bit about how you were chosen to translate the Littell, and also a little bit about if that's a usual process or the way you usually find your project.